My wife suggested an open relationship, but everything changed when her own sister started showing interest in me. We've been married for nearly 8 years now. She's 33, and we've been together for a full decade. We also have 2 wonderful daughters, ages 7 and 5. To be honest, I genuinely believed our marriage was stable. Sure, we weren't in that honeymoon phase anymore, but after 8 years together and raising 2 kids, who really is? Our relationship felt normal. We argued occasionally about small things, like me leaving my construction boots in the living room or buying too much stuff on Amazon, but nothing serious enough to threaten our marriage. I work in construction management. I started from the bottom as a laborer and worked my way up over the years, and now I earn a solid income. My wife works in a corporate environment, and she always seemed satisfied with her career. 3 years ago, we bought a nice house, our daughters are thriving in school, and last year we even got a family dog. From the outside, we look like the definition of the typical American dream. But when I look back now, I realized there were signs that something had changed. She had become different lately, more cheerful, more energetic, almost glowing. She suddenly seemed much more invested in her job. Before, she used to complain about work all the time like everyone else does, boring meetings, annoying coworkers, pointless deadlines. But recently, she started talking about work as if it was exciting and inspiring. And then there was Fernando, her boss. At first, he was simply a name that occasionally came up in conversation. She would casually say things like, "Fernando told the funniest joke during today's meeting," or "Fernando's idea completely saved the project." Nothing unusual, nothing alarming. But over time, the way she talked about him slowly started to change, even if I didn't notice it right away. One day, we were discussing leadership styles, and she suddenly said, "You should hear Fernando's perspective on leadership. It's honestly really inspiring." Another time, I joked about corporate buzzwords, and she immediately defended them by saying, "Fernando says those terms are important for building team cohesion." What struck me was how seriously she believed it. I remember teasing her once by saying, "Sounds like Fernando is your work husband." The second I said it, she froze for just a moment before forcing out a laugh. "Oh, stop it," she replied quickly. "He's just a really good mentor." At the time, I ignored the awkwardness. One evening, I was sitting on the couch watching a YouTube tutorial about fixing our garage door when she walked into the living room. She looked nervous, like someone carrying a secret they had rehearsed over and over in their head before finally saying it out loud. "Everything okay?" I asked, assuming maybe something had happened with the kids or her parents. "Yes, everything's fine," she answered while shifting uncomfortably from side to side. "I just need to talk to you about something." That immediately caught my attention. I paused the video and focused entirely on her. "What is it?" I asked. She took a deep breath before speaking. "I think maybe we should try living separately but still stay together," she said carefully. "Like, remain married, but live in different homes and share custody of the girls. Some couples do that." I just stared at her in disbelief, honestly expecting her to laugh and admit it was some kind of joke. But she didn't. For context, everything had seemed perfectly normal earlier that same day. We ate breakfast together, got the girls ready for school, kissed goodbye, followed our normal routine. Nothing felt wrong. No arguments, no tension, no warning signs. So hearing this completely blindsided me. I asked her where this idea was coming from and why she suddenly wanted an open-style arrangement. That's when she admitted she had been spending a lot of time talking to her sister Amanda. Now, Amanda considered herself some kind of relationship expert despite already being divorced 4 separate times. Yes, 4. Somehow, instead of realizing that maybe she wasn't the best person to give marriage advice, she acted like she had mastered modern relationships. I tried to stay calm, and honestly, I'm proud of myself for managing that. I took a deep breath, put my phone down, and attempted to have a mature adult conversation. I asked her if I had done something wrong, if there were issues in our marriage I hadn't noticed, or if she felt unhappy. I genuinely tried to communicate instead of reacting emotionally. But her response completely shocked me. She spoke about our marriage as casually as if she were discussing changing internet providers. She said she needed space and time for personal growth. Then she started throwing around all these trendy self-help phrases that sounded like they came directly from one of Amanda's books or podcasts. According to her, open relationships were supposedly the future of marriage. She claimed many European couples were already doing it successfully, as if what works for some people in Sweden automatically applies to families living in suburban Ohio. What hurt the most was how casually she said, "If it doesn't work out, we can always move back in together." Like our marriage was some experimental trial run. Like we were testing a new TV subscription we could simply cancel whenever we got bored. While she kept talking, all I could think about were our daughters. How do you explain something like that to a 7-year-old child? How do you tell your kids that mommy and daddy are technically still married, but no longer want to live together? None of it made any sense to me. That night, I barely slept. My mind kept racing nonstop. I was never the kind of man who would even consider something like this. Whenever the topic of open relationships came up before, usually during random conversations or jokes, she was always the first person to dismiss the idea. She used to say that kind of lifestyle was too complicated for her. Every time she heard about couples experimenting with modern relationships, she would roll her eyes like it was ridiculous. So what changed? Was I failing her somehow? Had I missed signs that she was unhappy? I kept replaying the past several months in my mind, searching for the exact moment everything shifted between us. But the truth was, she had seemed happier than ever lately. More relaxed, more energized, almost glowing. And if I had to pinpoint when this transformation started, it was around the same time she became much closer to her sister Amanda. From that point on, it felt like I was living with a completely different version of Bianca. I stood there staring at her, as if she were a stranger. The woman I had spent 10 years loving, the woman I had built a home and family with, suddenly felt unfamiliar standing in front of me saying these things. "Are you serious?" I asked. My voice came out calmer than I expected, even though inside I felt like I was boiling with anger. She crossed her arms and inhaled deeply, almost like she was preparing to give a presentation about emotional growth and modern marriage dynamics. "Yes," she replied firmly. "I've thought about this for a long time, and I honestly believe this is the best thing for both of us." "The best thing for us," I repeated in disbelief. "How exactly is destroying our marriage supposed to help us? Did you just wake up one day and decide you didn't want to be married anymore?" "It didn't happen overnight," she answered with irritation in her voice, almost offended that I hadn't already figured it out. "I've been thinking about this for months." I rubbed my face with both hands, struggling to process what I was hearing. "So while I believed everything between us was fine, you were secretly planning how to push me out of your life." "It's not like that," she insisted. "I still want us to be a family, just in a different way. You're being overly dramatic." I laughed bitterly. "Dramatic? Bianca, you're asking me to leave my own house, accept seeing my daughters only part-time, and pretend this situation is somehow normal." She let out an impatient sigh. "Raphael, please stop making this more difficult than it needs to be. I'm trying to handle this reasonably." The word reasonable made my blood run cold. "Reasonable," I repeated. "There's absolutely nothing reasonable about forcing me into a situation I never wanted." She looked exhausted, like she was already tired of arguing with me. "Listen, Raphael," she said coldly. "I wanted us to settle this peacefully. But if you make things harder, I can deal with it another way." I took a step closer and crossed my arms. "What exactly does that mean?" She held eye contact with me, her expression completely serious. "If you refuse to cooperate, I can file for full custody of girls." For a second, my heart felt like it stopped beating. "What? You heard me," she replied calmly. "If necessary, I can argue that it's better for the girls to stay with me permanently. You work long hours and you're barely home most days. I could easily get sole custody." I laughed again, but this time there was no humor in it. "You wouldn't actually do that. Try me." That was the moment I realized she meant every word. The woman I loved, the mother of my children, was willing to push me completely out of my daughter's lives just to get what she wanted. I swallowed hard and forced myself to stay calm. "This is about Fernando, isn't it?" Her eyes widened slightly, like I had caught her off guard. "What?" "Ever since you got close to him, you've changed," I said. "You became distant, colder toward me. Is this really about an open relationship? Or do you already have another man waiting for you? She folded her arms even tighter. That's none of your business. I shook my head in disbelief and laughed bitterly. None of my business? You're destroying our family, ending our marriage, threatening to take my daughters away from me, and somehow I'm not allowed to ask if another man is involved. You're acting paranoid, she said while rolling her eyes. No, I'm not, I replied immediately. Are you seeing him? She sighed heavily and looked away from me. I don't have to answer that. That response alone told me everything I needed to know. I clenched my fists, fighting to keep my anger under control. So that's it, I said quietly. You want to humiliate me, destroy everything we built together, and you can't even be honest enough to tell me the truth. Raphael, this decision has already been made, she answered coldly. Either you accept it, or we settle everything in court. She had cornered me. I could fight back, but I knew she would do everything possible to keep me away from my daughters, and I couldn't risk losing them. I swallowed my pride and frustration. Fine, I muttered, my voice weaker than I wanted it to sound. I accept. Immediately, her entire body relaxed, almost like she had just won a war. This is going to be better for everyone, she said. A week later, I moved out of the house. I rented a small apartment near my daughter's school, so it would be easier to stay involved in their daily lives. I kept trying to convince myself that I was doing the right thing, that I could still be a good father even if I wasn't living under the same roof anymore. But deep down, I was completely broken. At first, Bianca acted like everything was normal. She still texted me about the girls, talked about school activities and schedules, and tried to maintain this illusion that we were handling things maturely. But slowly, the truth started revealing itself. It didn't take long for me to discover that she was already involved with Fernando. At first, it was only small clues. The girls casually mentioned that Mommy's friend had come over for dinner. Little comments that immediately made my stomach twist. Then came the final blow. Social media. She began posting smiling photos online. Fancy dinners, weekend trips, little romantic moments that made the truth impossible to deny. And there he was in every picture. Fernando, standing proudly beside her with that smug, satisfied smile, like he had successfully stepped into the life I spent years building. Every single post felt like another punch to my stomach. I tried to ignore it. I tried convincing myself that looking at it only caused unnecessary pain. But the humiliation was impossible to escape. Everyone saw it. Our friends saw it. Our family saw it. Even distant acquaintances started connecting the dots and forming their own conclusions. Part of me hoped she would at least have enough respect for me to keep the relationship private for a while, but she clearly didn't care how much it hurt me. And the worst part of all was that our daughters were stuck in the middle of everything. They didn't fully understand what was happening, but they knew their world had changed. Meanwhile, every weekend when I picked them up, I had to force a smile and pretend everything was okay. I acted like my entire life hadn't fallen apart in front of everyone I knew. But inside, all I felt was anger. Anger toward Bianca. Anger toward Fernando. And anger toward myself for giving in so easily. Still, one thing had become absolutely clear to me. This story wasn't over yet. Maybe I had lost this battle, but the war was far from finished. But the war was far from over. I spent days completely consumed by everything that had happened. The humiliation refused to fade. Every time I picked up my phone and saw another picture of Bianca smiling beside Fernando, it felt like another punch straight to my stomach. She wasn't even trying to hide their relationship anymore. In fact, it almost felt intentional, like she wanted me to see every photo, every dinner date, every happy moment. One question kept echoing in my mind over and over again. Why? Why had Bianca changed so suddenly? This was the same woman who used to criticize open relationships and laugh at couples experimenting with modern marriage. She always claimed those arrangements were just excuses for people to cheat without guilt. So how could someone who once rejected all of that suddenly embrace it overnight? And then the answer hit me. Amanda. Everything started changing after Bianca became closer to her sister. Amanda had been the turning point. Ever since the two of them started spending more time together, my entire marriage had slowly fallen apart. If anyone could explain what was happening inside Bianca's mind, it would be her own sister. I already had Amanda's number saved in my phone. I stared at the screen for several seconds, hesitating before finally typing out a message. Amanda, I need to talk to you about Bianca. Can you come over tonight? She didn't respond immediately. When she finally replied, the message was short and direct. Okay, send me the address. I sent her the location of my apartment and waited. That night, around 8 o'clock, Amanda arrived. I opened the door, and she walked inside with the calm confidence of someone who already knew exactly why she had been invited. She glanced around the apartment for a moment. So this is your new place, she said. Yeah, I answered quietly. It's not much, but it works. I shut the door behind her and decided not to waste time. I want to understand something, I told her. I want to know why you put these ideas into Bianca's head. Amanda raised one eyebrow and crossed her arms. Raphael, do you honestly think I forced Bianca into anything? She asked calmly. She's an adult woman. I simply introduced her to a different perspective on relationships. A lot of people live this way nowadays. She made her own choices. Don't give me that, I snapped, already losing patience. Bianca would never have considered this on her own. She used to criticize this kind of relationship all the time. Amanda sighed softly before sitting down on the couch. People change, Raphael, she replied. Maybe she realized she wanted more freedom. Maybe she needed a different kind of relationship. I laughed bitterly. Freedom? This isn't freedom. It's just another excuse for cheating. Do you seriously think any of this is fair? I never treated Bianca badly. I was never a terrible husband. Amanda looked directly into my eyes. And Bianca was never a terrible wife, either. Her response immediately made anger rise inside me. Really? I asked sharply. Then explain why she's publicly showing off Fernando, like our marriage never even existed. Amanda stayed quiet for a few seconds before finally speaking again. Look, I didn't know she was going to handle things that way. That part is on her. But honestly, Raphael, maybe it's time for you to stop hurting yourself and move on. Move on, I repeated in disbelief. How exactly am I supposed to do that? She destroyed my entire life. Amanda gave me a small, unreadable smile. You'll figure it out eventually. The conversation continued for hours, but even after all that talking, I still felt like I was missing answer. To some point, I glanced toward the window and realized a heavy storm had started outside. Rain pounded against the glass, and thunder echoed in the distance. It's probably dangerous to drive in this weather, I said quietly. If you want, there's a spare room. You can stay here tonight. Amanda studied me silently for a moment, almost as if she were trying to understand something deeper behind my offer. All right, she finally replied. Thanks. I grabbed an extra blanket and showed her to the guest room before heading back to my own bedroom. I was exhausted, both mentally and emotionally, but even after lying down, I couldn't sleep. My head was still full of anger, frustration, and humiliation. Then, sometime in the middle of the night, I felt a light touch against my shoulder. I opened my eyes and saw Amanda standing beside the bed. She was wearing the oversized t-shirt I had lent her to sleep in, and her expression was intense and serious. Amanda, what is it? I asked, still half asleep. She leaned slightly closer. I think I know how you can stop feeling powerless, she whispered. I frowned in confusion. What are you talking about? A faint smile appeared on her face. Revenge. I stared at her without responding. Bianca moved on with Fernando, without hesitation, didn't she? Amanda continued quietly. So why shouldn't you move on too? My breath caught for a second. Amanda, that doesn't make any sense, I replied. You think being with you would suddenly fix everything? She shrugged calmly. Why not? Bianca wanted this new lifestyle, didn't she? Technically, there wouldn't be anything wrong with you and me being together now. I swallowed hard, unsure what to say. Raphael, she continued softly, you deserve to stop feeling weak. You deserve to feel like you still have control over your own life. She sat down carefully beside me, her eyes locked onto mine. Do you think Bianca feels guilty about any of this? She asked. Do you think she cared about how much it hurt you seeing her with Fernando? I stayed silent. Then why should you keep suffering while she's happy? Something about her words hit me harder than I expected. I was tired of being the humiliated one. Bianca had walked away from our marriage and started a new life without even looking back, while I was still trapped in anger and pain. Amanda gently lifted my chin so I would look directly at her. "It makes sense, doesn't it?" she murmured. And then everything spiraled from there. It wasn't about love or romance. It was anger, resentment, pain, and the desperate need to feel like I hadn't completely lost control of my life. I stopped thinking clearly and simply let the moment happen. That night, all I wanted was to forget. Forget the humiliation. Forget the betrayal. Forget the pain. And Amanda was there, offering me exactly that escape. The next morning, she was still lying beside me. The room was completely silent, but inside my chest, a crushing feeling immediately settled over me. What had I done? Slowly, I sat up in bed. I sat there on the bed, running my hand across my face, trying to process everything that had just happened. A few minutes later, Amanda slowly woke up and looked at me with a satisfied expression. "Do you feel better now?" she asked softly. I honestly didn't know how to answer. Part of me wanted to say yes, that for the first time since Bianca shattered my life, I finally felt like I had regained some control. But another part of me understood that none of this erased what Bianca had done or repaired the damage she caused. Amanda eventually got out of bed and started gathering her clothes. Before leaving the room, she turned back toward me one last time. "The world doesn't stop turning, Raphael," she said calmly. "You can stay trapped in your suffering forever, or you can choose to move forward." Then she walked away, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I sat there in silence, my mind spinning endlessly. Maybe Amanda was right. Maybe I had wasted too much time trying to understand Bianca, searching for explanations and answers that no longer mattered. Maybe it was finally time to stop looking backward and start thinking about myself again. That morning, after Amanda left my apartment with that same satisfied smile, I remained sitting on the edge of the bed, completely lost in thought. I never imagined I would become this kind of person. I never thought I would one day find myself doing the exact same kind of thing that once disgusted and enraged me. But strangely enough, I didn't feel guilty. Actually, it was the opposite. For the first time since Bianca destroyed everything we had built together, I felt like I had regained some sense of power over my own life. It was almost like I had finally stopped being the victim and started playing by the same rules everyone else seemed to follow. Over the next several days, the memory of that night stayed in my mind constantly. I kept trying to convince myself it had only been a moment of weakness, an impulsive mistake caused by anger and pain. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true, because the more I thought about it, the more I realized I liked the idea. So about a week later, I sent Amanda another message. "Any plans tonight?" She replied only a few minutes later. "Nothing I can't cancel." "Why?" This time, I didn't hesitate. "Come over." And she did. That was how everything truly began. What started as one reckless night slowly turned into an ongoing affair with Amanda, Bianca's own sister. Amanda started visiting my apartment more often, and before long, it became part of my routine. At first, I tried convincing myself it was temporary, just a distraction to help me escape everything Bianca had put me through. But the more time I spent with Amanda, the more I realized I genuinely enjoyed being around her. She was completely different from Bianca. Amanda never pressured me emotionally or demanded constant reassurance. She didn't pretend we had some deep romantic fairy tale connection. Everything between us felt simple and uncomplicated. No drama, no constant arguments, no emotional games. And when she was with me, I stopped thinking about Bianca. I stopped thinking about Fernando. For a little while, I stopped thinking about all the anger and humiliation completely. But like most secrets, ours didn't stay hidden forever. To this day, I still don't know exactly how Bianca found out. Maybe one of the girls accidentally mentioned something innocent without understanding what it meant. Maybe someone saw Amanda and me together and decided to tell Bianca. Or maybe Bianca simply sensed that something was happening. Whatever the reason, one afternoon, she suddenly appeared at my apartment furious. Her face was red with anger, and she was gripping her phone so tightly it looked like she was seconds away from throwing it. "So this is what you've been doing?" she screamed before I could even fully open the door. "You're sleeping with Amanda?" I looked at her silently for a moment. I didn't even bother denying it. And if I am, I asked calmly. The fury in her eyes intensified immediately. But there was something else there too, something deeper than anger. You're unbelievable, she shouted. How could you do this with my sister? I crossed my arms and stayed composed. That's interesting, I replied coldly. When you were sleeping with Fernando, it was all about freedom and modern relationships. But now that I'm doing something similar, suddenly it's wrong? This is completely different, she snapped. Is it? I asked. Because from what I remember, you were the one who introduced all these modern relationship rules. I'm just following the example you set. Bianca ran both hands through her hair, visibly shaken. This has to stop, she said desperately. We can't keep doing this. This whole situation is insane. I laughed sarcastically. No, Bianca. The only reason you suddenly want to stop is because you lost control of the situation. When you left me for your boss, everything was perfectly fine to you. But now that I'm with someone close to you, suddenly it's unacceptable. She's not just someone close to me, Bianca screamed. She's my sister, Raphael. My own sister. Don't you have any shame? I shook my head slowly. Oh, so family suddenly matters now. I replied bitterly. Because if I remember correctly, you didn't hesitate for a second before destroying our family. So why exactly should I care now? She looked like she was about to explode from anger and frustration. This entire thing was a mistake, she admitted finally. Everything. We should never have done any of it. I crossed my arms again. And what exactly are you suggesting? She took a long breath, clearly trying to calm herself down before speaking again. Let's stop fighting, she said quietly. Let's fix our family. I know I made terrible mistakes. I know I hurt you, but I want to repair this. I want us to live together again. I stayed silent for several moments, carefully thinking about her words. Part of me wanted to reject her immediately. Part of me wanted her to suffer the same way she made me suffer. But then I thought about my daughters. I thought about the life we used to have before everything collapsed. And despite all the anger still inside me, a part of me missed that life more than I wanted to admit. Finally, I let out a long sigh. Fine, I said quietly. We could try again. And just like that, we moved back in together. Today, Bianca is completely different from the woman she became during that period. She's more attentive now, more present. She puts effort into our marriage every single day and constantly tries to make up for the damage she caused. She treats me like a priority now in ways she never did before. It's obvious she understands how close she came to losing everything permanently. But if you think our relationship returned to normal after that, you'd be wrong. Because Amanda was never truly removed from my life. She still sees me. She still comes around. The only difference now is that Bianca has absolutely no idea. And honestly, I don't feel guilty about it anymore. I don't even see myself as a cheater. Because after everything Bianca taught me, I realized something important. In relationships like this, the person who stays blindly loyal is usually the one who gets hurt the most. At this point, I just want to be happy. And somehow, in this complicated mess, I finally am.